Oh boy, we get into week 2 and already, we got a lot of interesting teams. If you enjoy mediocrity, hello, welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and boy, do we have quite a week. We head straight into week 2, and before everything else, if you're new here, I watch every single playoff game, asterisk, of every participating regions before their respective full-on tournaments, like the international tournaments, mid-season, worlds, all that stuff. Asterisk because Europe is Europe EMEA. The LEC has a terrible format. Anywho, before just going back on that rant, just see last week's video. We introduce now the LCK, the LCS, the CBLOL, the PCS, making that now 5 teams with the LLA included who are in the midst of their playoff swing. And this is super cool. We get a lot of time to enjoy a variety of different styles and a couple of things that are to note. First thing that I would like to appreciate is the number of teams who are enjoying the red side benefits. I very much appreciate that some teams are using both red side and blue side in terms of their draft plans and allows a lot more flexibility. To note, flexibility is good so long as you're able to play more than one composition. I'm looking at you, 100 Thieves. I'm looking at you. But the other thing that I want to note is that there's a growing concern of the teams that I were expecting to at least have some strengths are becoming a little bit more disappointing. T1 as an example. Cloud9 is also kind of worrisome in terms of their view or in terms of their particular perspectives and play. Much of what's going on in the PCS has me a little bit concerned as their growing prospects are not going. But there's also hope. CBLOL has been giving me a lot of good vibes so far. So my initial view of the particular week is things are looking up for some teams. Things are looking down for other teams, but it's not the usual teams you would think. As a note, before we head off towards reviewing what we have seen for the week, I want to get your thoughts on what your favorite series for the second week was. For those who want to know, the second week is the one from March 21st all the way to the 25th. And yes, I am releasing this a little later than on the 25th myself. It's the 26th today, technically in the AMs. I want to hear what you guys have to say about your favorite series so far in this week. What did you like? What did you expect? All that good stuff. Leave everything in the comments down below. Without further ado, let's take a look at the series this week. Lower bracket of the LLA. We've got ourselves Impunity versus All Knights. Now, at first, I thought that the quality of Game 1 showed exactly why these two were the bottom seeds. But then comes Game 2 and Game 3, and I am just baffled as to how Impunity is the 5th seed and not the 1st seed. Now, of course, hold your horses. These kinds of series are hard to analyze given how one-sided it was. But between the solid vision play, map control, strong team fighting, limit testing that was left to a bare minimum even while ahead, and it's just questioning how good is Impunity actually. All Knights for their part, right, understood vision coverage and one draft style, but couldn't execute on either with the large disparity in skill laning phase-wise. Hopefully, next split, All Knights, you can clean up, gain more tools, sharpen the laning chops. As for Impunity, their strongest tool is by far the vision approach. Even in stops, how a team approaches vision says a heck of a lot, and by golly, it was so nice to see deep vision being used the way that it was. I would say that in true LLA fashion, the lowest bracket will likely make it to the finals, but I want to see if the coordination and vision play can match up to Isurus and any of the other teams moving forward. I'm torn on the MVP for this series. On the one hand, I want to give it to Kaini, who royally isolated Lessa, but honestly, the MVP goes to Ackerman for the way he enabled his team's vision, neutrals, and team fighting. Okay, we've got the round one of the Korean LCK's playoff. We've got over here KT Rolsters versus Liiv Sandbox. I'm left baffled as to how, KT Rolsters could have let this get to 4 games or even almost 5 games. Because both teams have some solid approach to vision and a strong understanding of their wearing conditions. Just KT is stronger in their application. It's just that their lack of flexibility in their playstyle worries me a little bit. This especially when they don't play respectively and get caught up and punished with ease. Liiv Sandbox, on their part, have a little bit more flexibility and dynamics within their drafts, but they wouldn't ever draft something that would leave me confident that they could execute it proactively. Liiv Sandbox as a team almost pound for pound matched KT for where it mattered, with the caveat that it required that KT kept making mistakes throughout the games. Only during Game 4 did I see Liiv Sandbox hold proactive measures and show strong chances of redemption, all up until the mid to late game rolled around, and then KT were given full reins on every neutral fight. KT Rolsters, for their part, show a good understanding of the situations at hand, but given their opponents, I want to see how they'll end up against or who they'll end up against before really sinking in any faith that they'll go further than the round 3 lower bracket of this playoff. My MVP goes to Cuz, who really cemented the flow of the early game and shaped how many of the neutral fights would really go their way. Okay. We hit the second round of the losers bracket, where we've got already Impunity versus Isurus Gaming. So I'll mention what I thought in Infinity's previous series. All right. How are they the 5th seed and not the first one? To note, both teams have very similar approaches when it comes to vision, draft, map movement, and fumbles, especially all alike. That said, Impunity was just that much more consistent in all of those aspects and more. Isurus looked like they had to wait for mistakes before ballooning leads, and when trying to find any avenues back when behind, the choices that they took were so risky and unnecessary that it would hurt them more than if they were just playing safe and turtling. Impunity, for their part, continue proactivity even while behind, but create bizarre choices on the macro level that any proper setup tend to crumble right away. It wouldn't surprise me to see Impunity make the semifinals from this performance, but I worry on the overall quality of play from the LLA as a whole if I think that Impunity is the most impressive showing so far, especially after the way they played Game 4. Something has to give, and I hope that Estral better show a way better performance than they did in round 1. My MVP for the series is 5kid, who played the most consistently in all 4 games. Still in round 1 of the Korean LCK playoffs, we've got over here Hamwha Esports versus Dplus Kia. Well. If the results of the series are anything to go by, I'd really use the Fry meme. Shocked, but not that shocked. Dplus have a history of being absolutely dominant in the early game and demolishing anything that can't keep up, but their late game and general mental when things go wrong take a huge nosedive. And this is the case of this series. Game after game of just playing early game drafts, only for me to ask, why do you have nothing here in the event that things go wrong? And for 3 games, things went wrong. Hamwha, for their part, played some solid League of Legends, some good vision, solid understanding of their win conditions. That said, the consistency in which they play around neutrals or execute team fights has me questioning their ability to continue this path and qualifying for MSI. So many times they would overforce or approach an angle that just made their draft weaker. Heck, even at times just waiting for Dplus to make an expected mistake is just not enough to make your case for MSI. I want to see how Hamwha face off against Gen G, because at this moment, all I see from them is at best making it to round 4 lower bracket, showing otherwise it's just 2 losses in a row for them. Now, also, please, Dplus, find a way to play mid to late game consistently. This is now the 3rd year in the row that I ask of this. I don't want to see this happening again in summer. My MVP for the series is Kingen, who impressed the heck out of me for how much solo pressure and team fighting solid tools and fundamentals of team fighting he brought to this series. All right. First playoff of the PCS, we've got CTBC Flying Oysters versus the Chiefs. How do I put this? All right. I'm going to say it like I did in my last video. All right. It makes no sense to have the LCO teams in the PCS playoffs, or at least at the very least, not in the upper bracket like this. Because series like these are hard to evaluate. I get no sense of strengths from the Chiefs other than their pretty good target selection, nor do I get a sense of strength from the Flying Oysters. Now, the Flying Oysters have a lot of weaknesses that are super easy to point out. Their late game, heck, even mid game decision making leave a lot to be desired. I was not a fan of their approach around vision and neutral objectives, but much of these lazy setups could be from, frankly, the lackluster play that the Chiefs brought up. The Chiefs have another shot, but from what I saw, they may get 1 win and not much more. Please, Chiefs, prove me wrong, please. As for the Flying Oysters, I am hoping that this was more of a practice match than the standard that you play, because it might get very difficult going forward. I need to see more consistency and less faffing about. My MVP for the series is Gemini, who kicked off every single snowball that the Flying Oysters got to benefit from. It's the first playoff series from the North American LCS. We've got over here FlyQuest versus 100 Thieves. And what a strong starting statement out of FlyQuest to show that they are still in action and not afraid of anyone. I was a really big fan of how they played around their neutral objectives and their focus around their respective win conditions. They straight up understood what needed to get done and the way to approach it. Vision, however, from both teams was kind of stock standard. I do think that 100 Thieves had an interesting approach when it came to using mostly the chokes of the different part of the jungle walls to get a lot of vision instead of just like pure complete vision. I think it has its flaws, but it was very interesting to see that that's what was going on there. The drafting phase in this series is one of my least favorites, since we saw the least amount of variety out of either team for a long time. And this is really on 100 Thieves, who played 3-for-3 front-to-back team fight drafts and excelled in zone control for it, whilst controlling, however, 0 zones across all 3 games. I hope 100 Thieves, you have the chance to diversify your approach that you have against Golden Guardians in your next series, because you will need it. While FlyQuest, you held strong, but the inconsistent team fighting was just showing, giving a lot more opportunities for 100 Thieves to come back where they really shouldn't have been able to do so. My MVP for the series is Spica, for very obvious reasons, but just from the sheer control he held over closer and enabling FlyQuest's neutral objective dominance. All right, we got the second playoff of the Southeast Asian PCS, the Pacific Championship Series, where we got Impunity Esports versus Team Bliss. More and more does this format keep proving me it's a bad idea to have the LCO in the PCS playoffs. Something to note about how Bliss played. They understood their win conditions, were coordinated in their target selections, and knew the kinds of fuck-ups that Impunity would aim towards. Granted, the lack of consistent vision play, the mismatch in skills from the solo laners, and the early game having 0 substance from their part, as well as the lack of general confidence until a mistake is found, leaves me with very little hope that Bliss will make it any further. I might say they have a chance to make it to the lower bracket round 2, but really not much further. Impunity, for their part, needs to clean up their act. Because if this is how they play going up against the Talons, oh boy, they will go right down to lower bracket at the speed they sent the Blisses. Inconsistent vision play, very rushed neutral setups, team fights that are frankly just kind of all over the place. If it wasn't for the solo laners of Impunity, especially Driver, helping out their early game to gain them the leads to get away with what they did, Team Bliss might have a solid chance at some wins. Some. And hence why my MVP goes to Driver. Who, boy, really picked up a whole bunch of the slack. It's the first round in the lower bracket for Brazil's CBLOL. We've got Furia Esports versus Fluxo. Honestly, Furia impressed me this series. I thought I was going to see a team that only reacts to mistakes, but game after game, showing strong vision play, solid understanding of neutral setups, good understanding of their opponent's draft habits, and great proactivity. It has me a little hopeful for the CBLOL. That is, if this is the caliber of play we get at the lower bracket. That said, Fluxo holds to learn a few things before returning to summer. One, you just can't rely on laning strategies and then wait till the late game for your draft to execute as it should. Holding 8 minutes, a 2K gold lead when it should have ballooned a lot harder within that time period means you aren't playing your win conditions, and then retrying that same strategy again is just no better. Fluxo holds some solid understanding of their win conditions and how to play around vision, but their passivity needs to be shed away if they want a shot at Worlds in the summer, and it pales in comparison to how Furia was able to execute around those same criteria. I'm hoping at least that they were an adjustment for it. Now I'm excited to see where Furia go from here as they go off to second and third round, where we'll see how the upper bracket fills off from then. And I'm also excited to see how my MVP, Trigo, who really freaking impressed the heck out of me during these team fight. Seriously, guys, ban this guy Saya. What the heck? All right. We've got the second playoff from the round one in the upper bracket for the North American LCS with Cloud9 versus Counterlogic Gaming. Big fan of Counterlogic Gaming, and as such, they've lost. Incredible series, though, so far. One of the strongest to date. It is a very early into the playoffs. Both teams have some solid strengths and some notable weaknesses. For Counterlogic, the tempo, aggression, and overall understanding of the win conditions for both sides is something to be commended. But the inconsistent nature of your vision play, some coordination issues, and lack of patience leads you to some positions that only hurt you for your overall gameplay. It wouldn't surprise me to see you hit round 2 or even round 3 in the lower bracket, but at this moment, Counterlogic Gaming and I hold zero confidence in an MSI showing. Cloud9, for their part, play the strongest vision game so far. Incredible early game approach, nice draft understanding, and some flexibility. My issue comes from the fact that they play like an early game machine, first and foremost. It's very cold, calculating, while holding a hard time once the late game is there. And they don't, especially if they don't have a 5K lead. Granted, Cloud9 still shows some solid work on how to play behind in this series, but comparing them to FlyQuest, I wouldn't bet on them quite yet to take the first place. The pieces are the strongest, but I want to see a stronger tempo play. My MVP for the series is Fudge, who controlled the space of all fights and minimized the side lane impact, allowing easier comebacks across the board. We head off to round 2 of the Korean LCK. This series was not for the faint of heart. We've got T1 versus KT Rolsters. It's the Telecom Wars. Now, I posture this. What's worse? A team that doesn't know how to play with a lead, or a team that doesn't know how to play from behind? Well, if this series leads me to believe anything, is that Who, boy, dear Lord, teams who don't know how to play with leads are significantly worse. This was such a back and forth series that could have easily been 3-0 for T1, but their approach to play was so brazen it honestly helped KT's play from behind. Meanwhile, KT, well ahead, didn't fully know how to deal with T1's just acting like they were playing from ahead, and it just gave them all of the ways to just come back at any chance. T1, on a fundamental basis, was the stronger team in the series, from vision to neutrals to team fights to drafting to wave manipulation, but also the team that should have known better with some of their brazen choices. Frankly, if they had lost, I would have said, good. You need to go to the lower bracket to really sober up on some of your choices. God damn it. But this is the closest second best that we can get here. Hopefully, we'll get to see T1 shape up for the semifinals, because, boy, they need it. My MVP for the series goes to, I guess, Gumayusi, who played his little heart out in that final team fight that really won the game. And honestly, that's all that mattered, was that last Elder fight. Just watch it. He's playing out of his mind there. And we're back to the Southeast Asian PCS in the lower bracket round 1, where we've got Beyond Gaming, or Megabank Beyond Gaming, versus the Chiefs Esports Club from our friends in Oceania. Given the play that I saw in this series, I have no confidence that Beyond Gaming would make it further than round 2 in this lower bracket, let alone how they managed this series. Let's also be realistic. I think that the Chiefs wouldn't have fared much better either. Both teams have inconsistent approaches to vision, neutrals, bizarre target selections, no sense of tempo to the game. The only thing that I'll grant Beyond Gaming is their coordination and decisiveness. While the Chiefs played incredibly sheepishly with worry and panic, Beyond Gaming took full advantage of it to grab any given kills back and forth, just non-stop, only having the Chiefs answer. Like, even during the Chiefs' win, I was barely convinced that they could even match close to the success that they had garnered in that one in any other game afterwards. I feel kind of sorry for them, as they didn't even get to qualify to MSI via the playoffs of the LCO in a regular format. But given the caliber of the PCS, they just didn't fare better than the top 6 here. My MVP for this series is Kongyue, who held such a firm grip on the ebb and flow of each team fight, really hurting the Chiefs' coordination at every single skirmish. Okay, we get to the upper bracket in round 1 for Brazil's CBLOL. And, man, the CBLOL freaking keeps delivering this season. We got Pain Gaming versus Red Canids Kalunga. I find myself in awe at the solid execution for vision, drafting styles, team fighting, target selection. You have it. Both teams here shine in what they can here. Red, all right, should be lauded as a force to be reckoned with, and if they weren't so unsure of their late game approach, they could have had a stronger shot in the series. Super excited to see how they hold up against Furia. Pain, on the other hand, show a near perfect approach to neutrals. When to contest them, the kind of visions you lay, if it's bait or full commit, the timings for smite, so on and so forth. The whole thing is like a well-oiled machine for them. And that's the part that sold me. Like, their lane assignments, general play for all stages, vision, like team fighting, all the rest of that stuff didn't really scream to me as notable in comparison to Red Canids here. Both of the teams seem pretty equivalent on that. But come their neutral play, and I'm in freaking awe. Like, this is like a science to them. If they make MSI, I would not be surprised. It would just take somebody to make sure they never get the chance to do so, or to never play the neutrals. My MVP for this series goes to Carioca, who kept psyching Red Canids with the flanks that he just had. It was really mesmerizing. And we're back to the LCS in the lower bracket with Golden Guardians versus the 100 Thieves. Jeez. All right. This result is best for everyone. All right. Both teams apply vision, went ahead excellently, but poorly when behind, are inconsistent about their neutral approaches, are solid about their team fight, and are really particular about the way they play behind. The biggest difference here is that Golden Guardians is at least a flexible team. Like, for the love of God, neither of these teams invoke confidence for the rounds to come. I would not even throw a stick hard enough to see how well they could do in MSI. But I at least know that Golden Guardians will have done their research for their opponents and not draft the same style over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. The one game 100 Thieves had something different. The game was a stop, and the other ones, it was just a coin flip. Golden Guardians, for the love of God, refine the early game that you have. Play safe for when behind, and have a more consistent game plan for ballooning leads. And then maybe we could think about something going here. Sheesh. The series took some years off my life. The MVP for this series goes to 60, right? Who outperformed Doublelift, and he didn't even get all the draft attention for his team, unlike his counterpart. Let's leave some thoughts for the teams that have fallen. Liiv Sandbox, Dplus, 100 Thieves, Chiefs Esports Club, Fluxo, All Nights, Isurus. We will see you in the summer. I mentioned some of the disappointments across the board within this week. And this is to note, even some of the teams that should have had, that should have had something to go for them. Dplus and 100 Thieves, especially with the kinds of names and recognition that they have behind them, you would hope that they would have fixed their mistakes from summer of 2022 into spring of 2023. And it doesn't seem like it's gone there at all. And it's rightfully disappointing. And I want this to be an understanding that, like, no one is safe. If you fuck up, if you do not actually shape up, nothing in the playoffs so far, and at least during spring, I can excuse that, like, teams are getting used to each other at this point. And so it's understandable that, like, all right, there's some nerves, some jitters, so on and so forth. But not a single team has had me confident that there is a favorite for MSI. And I'm looking to the LPL starting next week. All 10 of their teams have qualified. And looking at their teams, the LPL always has something strong going for them. But their top right now is looking kind of good. Not going to lie. And that's even with the fact that the LEC is still sending G2, who currently is still looking pretty strong. Even if I don't like the way that they qualified, they're still looking pretty good so far. And the VCS hasn't even qualified one team, and the LEC hasn't qualified a single team for their spring playoff also. And so if what they are looking forward to is the kind of performances that we've seen so far, and the only region that has had me even a little excited is the CBLOL, and that's not because of, like, anything spectacular, it's just because they're playing above average. I am not looking forward to the international performance going in. Now, it's week 2. Things will change. Things will clearly change, right? But I want them to change for the better. We have lost 7 teams, all right, so far into this playoff run. And the 7 teams that we've lost clearly did not have what it takes to do so. But the teams that have qualified right now aren't up to snuff. I need some more diversity in the drafts. I need more consistency in the vision play. Only controlling river vision is not enough. You cannot be only good at doing deep vision when you're ahead. And so I pass the question off to you. Have the playoffs so far in your respective regions, if you watch them, or if you watch multiple regions, have the playoffs seem disappointing to you? Right? Team fights are all fun and exciting, and there's some hype plays individually that can be recounted to. But as a general purpose of the quality of the games, do you think that they're so far lackluster? There's not as much substance to it. Do you think there's like a lot of frustration as to why some of the teams are even playing the way they're playing at this moment? Because personally, I think this is just not a good sign. Yeah, I want to hear what you guys have to think in the comments down below. The other thing I noted earlier, I'm really a big fan of the red side being such a huge priority in many places. I want to see this be utilized more often, but I don't want this to become the norm. I like it as a flexible thing because it gives a lot more attention towards the ban process. There's a lot more advantages to being the red side for how you're banning and controlling the tempo of the drafts. But I'm still also curious as to, because of the high propensity for Annie, how much this is just mitigated and some teams are preferring the map side. Right? It's a nice, interesting go-to at this moment, but I also want to hear, do you guys are really curious about the red side so far? Because it seems to be teetering on the 50-50 win rate, and I am enjoying that some teams are actually putting some emphasis towards it. Any and all of your thoughts in the comments down below. You know how I'll do this. Hopefully next week I will have this. Really, the scheduling is a nightmare. But I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below regarding everything. The team performances, trends so far that you've seen, everything going 1-3-1, red side priority. All of your thoughts I would love to hear in the comments down below. Greatly appreciate the views and conversations when there's some. And with that, I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.